Hello everybody, welcome to the latest episode, this very special episode of Tops and Tails. Joining me today on the podcast is this man. He MC'd for the first time in the Professional Darts Corporation in 2004 at the Phil Taylor versus Andy Fordham Showdown, and tonight he'll be MCing for the final time, the 2026 Paddy Power World Darts Championship Final.
Well, thank you, Huw, and yes, we did catch up and we had a great episode, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did making it. Thank you very much.
Enjoy. I'm going to go straight in with a big question. Does it feel surreal to be sort of at the end of your career now as a Master of Ceremonies?
Well, as we speak today will be my last day. So it'll be quite difficult, I think, because I've done this job for a long time now. My first darts match was in 2004 when Phil Taylor played Andy Fordham. So I seem like I've been around forever. And I've watched the sport grow. But I think it's at a position now where it's time for me, as I head into my 66th year, that it's time for somebody else to take over and take it forward. We've seen a lot of young players join us. There's no reason why we can't have a young staff.
Was there a moment where you realised that this was it? Was there a particular moment at all where you thought, I would like my time to come to an end now?
I don't know if there was a particular moment. I didn't wake up one day and go, I've had enough of this. There's a number of things that happen. Firstly, in life, you have family, you have children, they have children, and they become very important to you. And if you followed my career, you know that I'd have missed a lot of my children growing up. And that was a very bitter pill to swallow. Most people in our industry do miss out on a lot of family life. And that was very difficult for me. And it also meant that I ran myself ragged. I'd be working on a Saturday night in Manchester and jump in the car and drive straight home so I could be at their football on Sunday or a family party or something. So there was, it seemed that I was forever racing all over the country trying to please everybody, including my family. And then I had grandchildren, which I've got 8, and they're equally as busy as their dads. And of course that means that now I'm starting to do the same, but it gets more difficult as time goes by. And I would really like to see as much as I can of them growing up. And that was a big factor, a really big factor.
How old are they now, John?
So I've got, it goes from 14 down to 3.
Right.
I've got 8 of them.
Oh, wow.
6 boys and 2 girls.
Right.
So, yeah, and they're very, very active, just like their parents were. So, I'm revisiting football pitches that I haven't seen for a few years. But you know what? It's part of life, and I've accepted that. But I also owe it to my wife, who's missed a lot of me. And although we're great friends and we do a lot together, it's at times on the World Series when you're away 3 or 4 weeks at a time, right in the summer, right when we should be enjoying some time together. That's not been easy the last couple of years as we've scaled our lives down and bought a little bungalow on the coast, and we're supposed to be doing all the things that retired people do. So that all added to the package. So yeah, it wasn't a switch-on moment where I woke up one day and went, that'll do. It's been brewing for some time.
I mean, let's go back before we go into your whole career. Let's go back to your military days, because you were in the parachute regiment,
yes,
weren't you? You were a paratrooper.
Yeah.
You joined in 1975.
76 was my recruiting year. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, how much of that experience has defined you as a human being, John?
Well, yeah, I didn't spend very long there because I was injured quite early in my career. I didn't spend very long there, but it shaped me, and I'm always very positive about that. It shaped me to the man I am, really. It gave me the courage to do what I do. I don't think the general public appreciate just how brave you've got to be when you put your soul on the line, whether it be on television or whether you're a player or whether you're an official. We're all under equally the amount of pressure. And that shaped me, that taught me that I was bulletproof and that, I would never worry about anything. So in a way, I owe it a massive debt of gratitude.
I mean, when I went to the Falklands, John, back in August, I mean, I'm wearing my Falklands hoodie today, which is a total coincidence. But what really sort of came through the 5 days that we spent there on the military base in Mount Pleasant was that sense of discipline and order and structure. and respect and all these sorts of values. I mean, were those values really sort of transmitted to you in your time in the military
early,
from 1976?
From day one, really.
Right.
From day one, it was probably the biggest culture shock in my life. I didn't really know very much about what I was letting myself in for, and then I joined, and I joined as a junior soldier. There was a lot of us, and I think it was a culture shock to 100% of us, really. I don't think any of us thought it would be so difficult. And it was difficult, and it's difficult for a reason. When you join an elite unit, they're looking for a very special kind of person, and they want to make that person. So that's why they like you young, and they mould you into their way. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't, crushing every day. There was a tremendous amount of fun and camaraderie and banter. And when I had my medical discharge, that took me years to get over that. I missed that so much. I missed the camaraderie, the teamwork, the banter, so much. It was a competition from morning to night. Sometimes hysterical, sometimes really quite scary. But
are there any stories? Sorry, John. Are there any stories of things that happened that you look back on with fond memories? There,
yeah. There's horrific ones where we lost people, which is always very, very difficult. And then you get yourself back to the room and you're all together and there's one missing, and the older ones, the old sweats of the unit, will then sort of cheer everybody up and stuff. But no, there's been some of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life happen there. I remember once when we was on Spearhead, which meant that we were the battalion that was ready to sort of deal with any problem anywhere in the world. So we were literally confined to camp. We were ready to go anywhere, so we had to be battle ready. So we had a number of theatres of war in place. So we'd have a kind of counter-terrorism section, we'd have a general warfare section, we'd have a law and disorder kind of section. So we were sort of ready to go anywhere. And I remember I was walking back from our company office back to our block, and each company does a different role all day. You don't all do the same thing. So on Mondays, it might be A company working on signals, it might be B company on the range, it might be C company in the gym working on fizz. Then it might be on the Wednesday, all of us might carry every single bit of kit we have across a training area for a few hours. So everything was different. And on this particular day, the RSM shouted at me, go over the blocks and get everybody on the square. The square was this big piece of tarmac in front of the company offices, our parade square. Most military bases have them. There was a big H in the middle where a helicopter could land, and it was a normal sort of stuff. And I hadn't been there very long, and I ran into A Company's sort of block, which was the first block I came across, and saw a lad, and I said, the RSM wants everybody on the square. And he asked me why, and I said, I don't know. He said, well, don't come in here shouting everyone on the square unless you know why we're going on the square. Do we need to bring anything? Do we need to wear anything? So that was a good lesson. And then I went to my own company office, my own company block, and I shouted up the stairs, everybody on the square, quick as possible. The RSM's pulling his hair out. And I went to C company, D company, support company, and so on. And eventually we all assemble in every array of clothing you could imagine. With that, this red-faced RSM who looked like he was about to burst waited in the middle. We're all sort of anticipating what's happened. And a police car came onto the square, followed by another car which was towing a horse box. And out got this lieutenant colonel from I think it was the Royal Regiment of Wales or something. And he got out, and the RSM said, last night somebody thought it would be funny to break into the Royal Regiment of Wales's stable and cut the beard off their mascot, the goat.
Gosh.
And I'm sort of stood, but I'm not with anybody I know, because literally when we got to the square, we all had to sort of just assemble where we assembled. So I didn't know the guy on my left, and I certainly didn't know the guy on my right. And the guy on my left, sort of under his breath, said, well, it don't look too bad to me. And the guy on the right said, and I'm stuck in the middle, well, what do you know about goats' beards? And he said, well, I don't think it looks too bad. And the guy on the right said, well, it's all cut to one side. It's not even level, you know. And I burst out laughing because I thought, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. There's this goat with this odd-shaped beard that's really cut short, standing with this guy holding it and this colonel furious that his mascot's beard's been cut off. And the RSM who's about to blow up. And with that, I start laughing, and I'm uncontrollable when I laugh. If you see that YouTube clip of me laughing on the boxing and stuff, you know, literally when I go, you might as well give up. And the RSM saw me, and he pointed at me, and I thought, I'm finished. And he told me to get to his office in no uncertain terms. I never knew there were so many swear words that sort of linked together. And off I went. And I got in his room. I was petrified. I hadn't been there very long. I really was scared. I was really worried what was going to happen to me. You know, this is my career. I can't set off on this foot. And I heard him screaming and shouting on the parade square. And then I heard the cars drive away. And then I heard the sort of guys sort of run back to their duties, whatever they were doing. And the RSM was coming up the stairs. I heard every step as he made the way to the room. He burst the door open. He had a civilian secretary there, lady sat typing and doing sort of admin work. And she got up and went out. And I thought, no, this is going to be bad. And he came and he slammed the door behind me. And he got to his desk and he sat down and he burst out laughing. And he looked at me and he said, how can it be only me and you that find it funny? And I was like, I was so shocked. I was sort of giggling, but like in nervous giggle, you know.
Yeah.
And he said, I can't believe that. He said, just give yourself a couple of minutes, take a seat. So I sat down and he said, have you ever seen anything so funny in your life? He said he brought a goat in the back of a car, you know, and the beard was all sort of to one side. And I said, I know, sir. I said, I had two lads either side of me that were sort of turned into the world's leading expert on goats' beards, you know, and that's why I laughed. And he said, look, give yourself a couple of minutes, go out of this office and tell them that I was absolutely furious. I've thrown the book at you and I'm waiting to find you a suitable punishment. I said, okay, sir. He said, right, get away. And off I went. And I got back to the block, and to this day, I don't think anybody that served with me knew that I'd actually sat down and more or less had a cup of tea with him and just laughed for half an hour. That was and do you know what? I could reel off 100 stories like that because that's what it was like. And I think men that are that far up the list, that close, that elite, they have to survive on that kind of humour to keep them going.
Right, exactly. An element of gallows humour, maybe, things like this, but you do that to survive, like you say. I mean, how much of that have you taken to darts? I mean, are there parallels there? That it's because the darts world is like a circus. You know, we all live out of each other's pockets. We all travel the world together. All these different places, all these different stories, different characters, personalities. Exactly the same as the military, John.
Absolutely. There are so many comparisons, and there are in factories, there are in garages, there are all over the country. There's groups of people getting together, men and women, and they have banter and good fun on a daily basis. In fact, sometimes in the most bizarre places, undertakers, you know, you get a group of them together and they just sit there laughing away. You know, banter's very important to the morale of whatever we do. And we've had some tough nights, Huw. We've done some very long days and very long nights. And
yes, we have.
And we've also had to deal with stuff as well. We've also had to deal with, you know, I remember in Liverpool when Eric Bristow died, he literally had just died. You know, dare I say, the most senior man at the PDC. You know, without Eric, maybe we wouldn't be working that night. And we're in Liverpool Premier League, and somebody came in and said, Eric's died. And the room kind of, those that knew him a lot longer than me, sort of retired into their little corners, had their few minutes, and then we went out and performed. And that's very similar. You know, you need to have that. And of course, characters are very important. Russ was a great character. George, a great character. You know, all the referees we've had, including yourself, you've taken to it like a duck to water. It's not been very easy for you, but you know, you've really stamped your authority. And Mark is the same. You know. So yeah, it's very, very similar, and it's important to get involved in it a little bit.
Well, could you describe to everybody your relationship, your friendship with Russ Bray? Because the two of you have been very close for a number of years now, haven't you?
Yeah, we found a friendship, obviously at work, and we found we had quite a bit in common as well. And Russ, for me, really is a great wingman. You know, Russ Bray is a unique character. I've never really met anybody that can really shine a most positive moment out of a most negative moment. We have stayed in some awful hotels over the years. Awful, I mean, you know, because we might have missed a flight or something's happened. And he'll say, but it's only for one night. Come on, we'll make the best of it. And he always sees the glass half full. There's never the mirror on the bend. It's always the light at the end of the tunnel with Russ. And I asked him once, I said, you know, you really do constantly have 100% professionalism, and you never find a dull moment. You always seem to be positive. And he said, I've had a real job. I've worked on scaffolding, I've done labouring jobs, I've done this, I've done that. And I know how hard it is for people out there. And let's not pretend for 1 minute that, you know, we're not digging holes here, we're not putting up scaffolding. Just remember that. And a lot of people should take that in their job. You know, there's a lot of people out there in the world that work really, really hard every day of their life. You know, our builders and our drivers, constant work. Working in warehouses, and they might think they're in a mundane job. You know, they're in one of the most important jobs in the world, and they probably don't know it because nobody ever tells them, and nobody ever wants it. You know, who would want to do these kind of really tough jobs? And my hat goes, I take my hat off to them. You know, and that's what Russ does. He remembers those times, and he's the ultimate sort of drum banger. You know, he's the man you want in the trenches for sure, and I like that quality in a man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are there any sort of stories that you remember when you think of Russ Bray? Are there certain memories that particularly spring to mind? Yeah,
I think when I had to leave one Saturday, I had to go and do the boxing in those very early days, and Russ was going to stand in for me. You know, that's another quality he had. He could pretty much do every job, and he would try his very best, and he would take it on as if it was, you know, the last time it would ever be done. I mean, he really did put his heart and soul into it. And ITV thought it would be a really good idea to go and buy him a suit. And they went into a shop in Wolverhampton. They bought him this blue shiny suit. And I think Matt Porter took one look at it, our chief executive. He's like, Russ, seriously, mate, you can't wear that tonight. And, you know, but that's typical of Russ. You know, he wouldn't have seen a problem in it. He's like, what? You know,
I tell you what, I think I've seen the picture of that. I wonder if we could edit that into this episode so the viewers can see it, because I tell you what, it's an iconic image, isn't it? You know,
for sure. And it'll be on someone's phone somewhere.
Did Russ like it? Did he like the suit?
Well, I don't know whether he liked it. I just think they thought it might be quite sort of, you know, it was quite outstanding, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't sort of blending in with the wallpaper. It was a bit outstanding.
I tell you what, we touched about corpsing earlier on, and there's that famous video of the boxer. I mean, to this day, I still don't know what he was doing, John.
No,
like, sort of on the floor.
Really.
To this day,
there is a long story about that boxer that maybe one day, you know, I'll try and relay, because people often ask me, you know, why did you find it so funny? What was it about? But you know, sometimes people do the most bizarre things, and for some reason, you know, I've often. I remember once we nearly all lost it on the stage when. Whatever possessed this person to turn up like this, fancy dress is great. And often, even myself and you have said, wow, look at that. You know, we've had a Freddie Mercury that looked great.
Yes,
and we've had, you know, always the superheroes. We always see them. And I like it when people really go out of their way and create some great fancy dress. A guy turned up one day and he had a polystyrene head. It must have been 4 foot by 4 foot square. And thought it'd be a really good idea to make his way to the front, which meant that absolutely nobody could see anything because he had this great big head on. And Russ said something like, God, he's a big head, isn't he? And we all sort of looked.
Oh.
and you see this guy in the front row with this great big head. I mean, it must have weighed a ton. And he had both his hands sort of holding it up, or at least holding it in place. And it had no relevance to anything. I don't know who it was supposed to be. I don't know the character. And there's this guy with this great big head, and Russ just to say something like, he's a big head. And literally you could hear the coughing and spluttering. And then the players come up and shake our hands, and they're looking at us like, what are you laughing at? You know, what's so funny? And then they'd turn to face the crowd, and then they'd see it, and they'd look back and say, wow, you know, it don't get any funnier. But we've seen lots, haven't we?
Well, there's one that I remember, and I don't know whether the video is on YouTube or not, but it's just in the vague memories that I have. when Sid Waddell, God rest him, was doing the draw for the UK Open.
Oh, yeah, God.
And he was shouting the numbers. And, of course, you have to say... So Sid's going, number 4, Phil Taylor.
Yeah.
And then you have to say over the microphone to the crowd, number 4, Phil Taylor.
Yeah.
And whatever it was Sid was doing was just cracking you up.
Yeah,
and, of course, it's live, and you were just
first of
in
all,
hysterics. But Sid was just... I don't know what he was doing. But do you remember that?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I was really close to Sid. I found Sid a fascinating character. I've been back to night school and I've done lots of different online courses and stuff, and Sid really got it. He understood the importance of learning and bettering yourself. And he was as well documented his university time and stuff, and he was really loved by great people in academia. But he had an unusual way about him, and on this particular draw, he said to me, "Right, kidder," he said, "now we won't be making no mistakes because I've wrote 6. And put a line under it on my hand, and I've wrote 9 and I put a line under it on my hand, which you'll find is identical to the balls in the draw." And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's how you would distinguish a 9 and 6. You put a line under it like it's really basic stuff.
Yeah.
And then he drew out this 9 and he looked at it and he sort of nodded at me as if to say, "Don't worry, I've got this. I know this is a 9.
Oh, right.
And then screamed, "9!" down the lens into the camera, and I just thought, if everybody knew that he's really thought this through, he's not only wrote it on his hand, and it was just so basic, but it was just so funny, and you couldn't possibly do a draw with the likes of Sid and Eric. Eric would take a draw ball and go 21, and I'd say 21, that's Adrian Lewis, and he'd go 18. And that's Andy Hamilton. And then Eric would say, "Oh, this would be a great match, this now. What'll happen here is, see, Lewis is a big prolific scorer." And he'd start explaining, and I'd be like, "Yeah, but we've got, 32 games to do.
Oh.
Eric, let's worry about that a bit later. Let's do the next game, So there's a lot of that goes on. That draw is a minefield, because we want... Ned Bolting of ITV said, "Do you know what? Honestly, in all my career, I've always wanted to do a draw." I said, "Okay." So he did the UK Open draw, took the ball out, gave me the number, I said the name, and he put the ball back in the draw.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, and now you've got to carry on. And I was saying to myself, if that ball comes out again, which it will, I'll just say, "Already drawn, thank you, place that in place, and the next one, please." And I'd do something like that to make it kind of cover it a bit. But don't forget you're live and the transparency's there. People can see the balls in the bottom of the draw. Everything's exposed. There's nowhere to hide. I can't suddenly say, "Oh, hold it a second, let's do that all again." He's put the ball back in the draw. You have to carry on. And believe it or not, it was the very last ball.
Oh, thank
so
goodness
it was
for
just
that.
left in there, You couldn't do that if you tried that 1,000 times. You'd never get that right. So that was, that's a panic.
This episode is brought to you by British Army Recruitment. You may have heard a little bit about the Army already, but maybe you're wondering, what's in it for me? Well, let me tell you a quick story which might give you a better picture. In August 2025, I visited the Falkland Islands for the first time and spent 5 nights on the Mount Pleasant military complex there, along with my father, who is a veteran of the Falklands War, which took place there back in 1982. Whilst we were there, we helped to launch the brand new Dart Society on the base. It was only a small idea, but it was one that brought many, many people together. It was incredible to see firsthand the sense of camaraderie, discipline and support that shapes life in the Army. You can really feel it in the way that people look out for each other, push each other and celebrate achievements together. Darts has officially been recognised as a sport in the Army just this year, joining rugby, football and many more sports. Sport isn't just a hobby here, it's built into the week. Most bases dedicate Wednesday afternoons to sport, whether it's a 5-a-side game, a run or a darts tournament. And it's not just about playing games, it's about focus, staying calm under pressure and teamwork. Those are the kinds of skills that carry over into every part of your life, both in and out of the Army. Whilst I was on base, I trained with a 460 Port Troop of the Royal Logistic Corps. That experience opened my eyes to a new level of elite fitness and mental focus. It's not just about keeping fit, it's about building resilience, sharpening your mind, and forming lifelong friendships with people who share your mindset and values. And there's more. Beyond sport, the Army offers opportunities to travel all over the world, whether that's for training exercises, humanitarian missions, or adventurous activities. You could find yourself kayaking in Norway, diving in New Zealand, or taking part in other activities designed to build confidence and push your limits. For long-term career growth, the Army is the UK's biggest apprenticeship provider, with over 40 options and paid training in more than 100 roles. So whether your sport is darts, football, rugby or something else, the British Army has something for you. Search British Army jobs to find out more. It's about more than just a career. It's about experiences, lifelong friendships and building skill sets that can last a lifetime. How did you get into darts MCing, John? How did you get into sports announcing?
Okay, so when I left the military, I did a number of jobs. I did a number of things. I qualified to drive a black cab. I went back into the military as a reservist. I did a number of things, and one of the things I did was I went and did a photography course very early. I did it when I was in rehabilitation in the military. They were very good. Although they discharged me and said, you couldn't possibly be taking part in an elite unit's work anymore, get yourself away. They did give me some great advice and gave me a course, which I did, which was a photography course. And I took up photography, and very lucky for me, I got a job at the BBC very early in my career, and I did about 14 years there as a freelance photographer. And I went all over the world for them, and I did some incredible stuff. But it wasn't what I wanted. I always felt that there was something else. And I was at the BBC one afternoon recording a programme where we had about 300 in the audience, and the warm-up guy didn't turn up. And I can still remember the floor manager's name. She was a fantastic woman. She was so professional, but more importantly, she was so kind to anyone working. And her name was Jackie Foote. And I don't know if you're out there, Jackie, thank you so much for giving me the first break. She really did. She probably doesn't even know she did it, and she probably doesn't remember it because it would have been something very small. But she looked at me and she said, John, before you start taking any pictures here, we've got to tell the audience where the emergency exits are, what to do, when to clap, when not to clap. The kind of stuff you would expect in a studio, of which I'd heard so many times I could more or less relay it parrot fashion. And I went out and did it, and I had a bit of fun with people, and I came back and she said, you did a really good job, you're the wrong side of the camera. And that just them few words kind of sunk in a bit. I went to the athletics to cover some athletics at Crystal Palace as a photographer in the morning for the BBC, and I was doing the boxing in the evening at the Royal Albert Hall. I went to the athletics, and I couldn't understand a word the MC said, and I don't think anybody in the audience did. And I was really upset by it because I'd been around the world. I'd been to America and watched some great sporting events take place, and it's really quite a night out. You really do feel like you're somewhere special. I didn't feel very special at all. I thought this is really just thrown at the audience, and it wasn't fair. And I went to the boxing that night, and it was really very basic. In the blue corner, Johnson, in the red corner, Smith. I was like, no, we can do better than that. And I said to Lawrence Lustig, photographer, and a few others that was sort of stood at ringside with me, I honestly think I could do a better job. And I remember old Monty Fresco said to me, well, you certainly know the boxing. Why don't you do that? And it left me thinking. I went and spoke to the Boxing Board of Control's General Secretary, John Morris, and he had just taken over from Ray Clark, and he said, well, come up for an interview and see what we do. I went and did the audition, and ironically, they give you a boxing programme, and they say, announce the main event, which was clearly printed on top of the programme, and I'd actually been to the fight. And I said, I was at this fight. And I did it, and he said, well, John, I've got to be honest, it's great. Yeah, good luck. Here's your licence. I got my licence. And without too much of a cliche, the rest is history. I got in touch with a number of promoters. It was the birth of Sky, really. They had just started as an independent sports channel. Long overdue did we need one of those in the country. I grew up in an era where there was BBC and ITV. I can remember BBC Two, you know. I can remember
Channel
going to
4,
colour.
or
I can remember
yeah.
it being born, you know. And so I can remember the first ever breakfast time, you know, and all that sort of stuff. I'm of that age. And but we long needed, if you're a big sports fan like I was, we needed a dedicated sports channel. Along come Sky. And that was it. The doors, the floodgates were open. At last, we didn't have to wait every 6 weeks to watch live boxing. We didn't have to wait once a week to watch a live football match. We could see it every day of the week, and it was perfect. Made my life a treat. And I did a couple of boxing shows for them, and they were really happy. And that was me. I was sealed.
Do you know, it's amazing, isn't it, how many career opportunities have happened because somebody didn't turn up. I was exactly the same. Yeah. I think Russ was exactly the same. There's a number of us in darts who all started because the guy who was supposed to be doing it didn't turn up for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many careers start like that, almost by accident. Or do you know what I mean?
Well, I think we're all fans. Somebody said to me once when I was a photographer, "You're a fan with a camera." You know, and that was a very good, because I wasn't a professionally trained photographer, and I was really a fan with a camera. And because you're a fan of darts, you played darts. It's pretty obvious the next step where you would go would be, if you can't make it as a professional dart player, then where do you go? And
yes.
then you said to yourself, well, actually, I think I could be a referee, and you did it. But you couldn't have done it if you hadn't have been a player or had an interest in the sport, because you have to know what you're doing.
And it's amazing as well, like you say, it was just about the birth of Sky Sports, so right place, right time.
Yeah,
timing is very important.
That always helps. You know,
Yeah.
I'm when you get young people come into the game, in any game, in boxing, in football, in any sport, I'm always right behind them, because any time you join, people will say to you, "Oh, you missed the glory days, you missed the boat, it used to be great, it used to be this." Nonsense. You make your own way and it will be what it is for you, you know. Don't be put off by people saying that sort of stuff. There'll never be another Phil Jones. I'm sure there weren't. Let's think about what he did. He not only did he give up an incredible job. When Phil Jones was so popular in London and the home counties that when the PDC were formed and split from the BDO, he had to make a decision. And he went, "I'll come with you new lads, with Eric and Tommy Cox and all the great gang, the Big 14 or whatever they're called." And he said, "I'll come with you." So a brave move on his part, and it paid off. He had some glory years with the PDC in its infancy. And they were very, very tough shoes to follow. And I remember I always, as a photographer, I always wanted to work for Barry Hearn. And I did. As a photographer, I worked for him. And he was always very professional. But Barry had this way. Barry was like your favourite company commander. He always made you feel good. And you worked really hard for Barry. But then he would always do things like, "Right, come on, we're all finished. Let's go to a steakhouse and have a great night." And it was always, the payoff was always better than the work. And he was just a breath of fresh air, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to work for him? And I did the photography, and I phoned him up, and I said, "Do you know, Barry, I'm doing the announcing now?" He said, "Yeah, somebody told me." He said, "But you know, I've got an announcer, and I'm very loyal, but you know what, keep going, and who knows?" That's all he said. And then I got a call from him, and he said, "I've won the purse bid for Joe Kawasaki and my own fighter, Delaney. I'd like you to do the fight on ITV." And I remember saying to myself, and it wasn't much notice, I think I had about a 2-week notice, and I said, "I will smash this out of the ballpark. I will work so hard. I will know everything I need to know." And I drove the boxing border control mad. Do you know who the referee is going to be? Who's going to be the timekeeper? Who's going to be the steward in charge? Who's going to be the medical officers? What, John? We don't know yet. You know, the fight's. Yeah, but I need to know because I'm rehearsing a script for this big fight, and I was that keen to get it right, because I knew if I made a good impression on Barry, which I did, I would be okay. And I made this good impression. And on the Monday, Barry had a meeting. He always has a sort of debrief. It's very similar to being in the army at Matchroom, because there is a hierarchy, there is a rank, there is that camaraderie, there is that professionalism. And on the Monday, he had a debrief, and he had a television expert that worked for him called Martin Marks. God rest his soul, he passed away far too young. I believe he had a brain tumour and he passed, and it was such a loss for me because he was a guiding light to me, a really super bloke, a really funny man as well, which always helps. And he said to Barry, I thought the announcer was great, Barry. We've got the Moscone Cup coming up at Christmas and we've just bought the rights to the World Pool Championship. I think this lad's perfect. And that was it. I was in. And he came to me one day, Barry, and said, I've just come from the darts, of which I knew nothing. I knew who Phil Taylor was. I knew who Eric Bristow was. I knew who Jockey Wilson was. In fact, I knew who John Lowe was. I'm saying I didn't know nothing. I probably knew 4 or 5 players. But I didn't know anything about the game. And he said, we're going to do Andy Fordham and Phil Taylor at the Circus Tavern 2004, Sky Box Office. And I was like, well, what did you want me to do? And he said, I want you to announce it. Well, I told you, the reason why you're so good is that you've done it at every level. You've played it, you've been a fan, you know exactly what's going to happen. Well, I didn't have that advantage. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew it was a show. And I remember speaking to Vic Wakeling at Sky. I was working at Sky late doing some Greyhound voiceovers or something or other. And he was still there, and Vic came out. And I said, Vic, you know I'm doing this? He said, yeah, just razzmatazz it. Make it really good for the punters at home. Get up there and really give them a great walk-on. He said, I want every walk-on to be like Sugar Ray Leonard. Got in his car and drove off. And I thought, well, that's great. I suppose that's what I've got to do. And you know and I know, and especially the listeners that are interested in darts also know, that was a terrible night. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Andy Fordham was taken unwell. I think only 7 legs into the match. We had a packed crowd. We'd already done our pre-show, so we'd already had Wayne Mardle, and we had John Lowe and Eric Bristow, and I think at the time Roland Shelton, and they'd all played. And now it was Phil and Andy. They'd taken a break because Andy didn't feel very well. Andy went outside. I was in the press room thinking, what's happened here? I made my way around the back of the arena because you couldn't walk through the crowd. It was so busy. For those listeners that have been to Circus Tavern, you know, it is a great environment. We held the World Championship there for years. It really did create a kind of lion's den, but it was impossible to walk through. So I went round the building, and outside was Andy, very unwell. First time in my life I ever dialed 999. I called an ambulance. I have a medical knowledge, so for me it was okay. I'm pretty good at first aid and stuff, and I retrain regular, and if anyone's listening, do it, because it's very important. You never know when you're going to need it. And I do it every year. I have a refresher course. I've done it since Dot. And I sat him on the floor, lifted his legs up high onto a chair, took his carotid pulse because I couldn't get my hands around his wrist, and it was racing away, and I phoned the ambulance, and they came, and he was really unwell, and they stabilised him, and of course Phil was given the win. I came on and told the crowd what had happened, and I thought, oh God, I really can't be involved in this darts. This is like the worst night of my life, you know.
Yeah.
I think the fans were pretty good about it. I think they understood, you know, there's very little you can do when a man's got to go to hospital, you know. But really, for me, I was really a fish out of water. It really wasn't the easiest night. And Barry phoned me the next day and said, you know what, that was brilliant. You were brilliant. Don't worry about what happened. Those things happened. But, you know, you did exactly what I needed you to do. I want you to do some darts for me. And I was like, wow, if it's going to be like that, definitely not, you know. But Barry has very persuasive ways, and you know, in them days we were a very, very small team, and I felt obliged to assist. I was in, as you say, at the 2005 World Match Play. The week before I was in, I think I was in Taiwan working, and Barry called me and said, when you land, you need to go straight to Blackpool, you're doing the World Match Play. And this was his final words to me on the phone. He said, and I need you to do a really good job. And when you work as hard as they do to get things to happen, to get good sponsors, to get better money, to get great TV, they've worked and they put their soul on the line. You need to back them up, because we're working and you're watching because of the hard work of them people. And the players and the officials and the promoters. And unless you understand that, you'll just turn up as a paid job, give a mediocre performance. It's just not good enough. You have to know the full story. And the rest is history.
Well, John, Barry said to you 20 years ago, do a good job. John, you've done an unbelievable job for darts.
Thank you.
And for sport. You said earlier on that there will only ever be one Phil Jones, which is quite right.
Yeah.
There will also only ever be one John McDonald. And just to finish off, I do just wanted to explain to everybody that when I first started, especially, I used to get very nervous.
Yeah.
And you turned to me and you said, you wouldn't be up there if you weren't the best in the world. You're the best in the world.
Yeah.
And that really helped me, like genuinely. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for your generosity towards me, towards everybody who works for the PDC, who works alongside you. Tonight, as this episode's going to go out, is going to be a very emotional night. I grew up with you, John. I grew up with you as the MC when I was a kid growing up.
That. Yeah, it won't be easy, no.
It won't be easy, will it? So do you think when the day comes, it won't be an easy day? Will it be a bit surreal?
No, I'm pretty good at handling the pressure of that sort of thing. It'll be a couple of days later when I probably look back.
Will you miss it, John?
Oh, yeah, of course I will.
You will miss it, yeah.
I think the most important thing I'll miss, I told you at the beginning, when I had to leave the army, the thing I missed most, and I couldn't get it anywhere, because I was such an individual. As a freelance photographer, you're on your own. When you're driving a black cab, you're on your own. There's a lot of time to think. And I didn't have that banter. And I found myself looking for it. I wanted to be part of a team again. And that's why I went back to be a reservist, because I wanted to feel part of a team. I was a bit overwhelmed by it, because I couldn't take part in the stuff that I wanted to. And they ended up employing me as a civilian. So, I really then couldn't even do what I wanted to do. But the camaraderie was there. And then I found darts and boxing and darts and other sports. And I was like, yeah, this is where I need to be. So it will take me a couple of days for it to sink in. And I'll miss the banter. But nothing lasts forever. We must all move on. And we must be professional about it. And I wish whoever takes over, whoever it might be, I know the PDC haven't made the decision yet. And, the format's changed, life changes. Don't be one of those people at home that go, oh, I can't believe, we don't get a newspaper anymore. Oh, I can't believe, that this bloke's left and he's doing this and he's doing that. And we've had 3 different people. Don't worry about it. That's what happens. It will evolve. And I'm sure, I know for a fact that the PDC Darts is in great hands, tremendous young team. That will be the thing to watch in the future. It will only get better and only get bigger.
And final question, John, very quickly. Favourite walk-on?
Yeah, I think Phil Taylor.
It was Phil Taylor. I thought it might be something. Yeah, I think it was special. Well, you made it special.
I like Michaels. I like Van Gerwen. I really appreciate what Van Gerwen did, and I really appreciate what little Luke Littler's doing now. And I get it. I get all of it. And I know that fans out there are particularly fans of particular walk-ons. There's some great songs out there, some awful ones as well, by the way. We often look at each other on the stage of, what is this? But
no, we don't. No, I love them all.
Yeah, you love them all. Yeah. But we do, and it's taste, isn't it? At the end of the day, they like it, and they if they enjoy it and it makes them feel good.
Well, you dancing along to Baby Shark. I mean, that's one of my.
Who wouldn't?
Well, exactly. Well,
don't forget, I've got granddaughters who love that stuff. That's a weird walk-on song, isn't it? Is that one of the strangest? I mean, amazing. I always look at a player and think, I wonder what he's going to come on to. Like Ricky Evans always seems to pick. He did YMCA at the Worlds and that sort of stuff. And I think he did the Birdie song once or something. But it's great. The fans enjoy it. Look, at the end of the day, sometimes there's a lot of things in the world which make you feel down and depressed. I hope certainly we're not one of them. I hope if you need a little escape in your life, and come and watch the darts. And more importantly, come and see us live. There is a big difference. I know football fans that really prefer going to football live than watching it on TV. I know people that prefer it on TV. But come to us. Come and see it. Make it a bucket list. And thoroughly enjoy the whole atmosphere of the evening, be part of the party, because that's where it's going.
Well, John, you've been a huge massive ingredient in the live experience of darts over the last 20 years, a big factor in its success, in its growth over the last 20 years. So on behalf of darts fans all around the world, thank you very much, and we'll all miss you, mate.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks,
Pleasure.
John.
Pleasure.